what's going on? It's Dan Baird with the Rumination Project. We're on our fourth episode here of Mental Health Mondays, and we are having it on a Wednesday today due to the holiday. And I thank you for joining me. And I'm going to tag some people in here, some more people in here, and play a little background music. But hope you all had a great holiday. I took a few days off and celebrated with a few friends, and then did pretty much absolutely nothing yesterday. So I hope you all enjoyed it as well. And I'm going to tag some more friends in here, like I always do. But it was also, this is a episode about depression today. And if you watch the news, there was a lot of gun violence over the holidays. And really has something to do with, with our mental health system in our society now. There was literally a guy who went down in Philadelphia and with an automatic weapon and just started shooting people at random. I mean, that's the point we're at in society now. And it's really sad. It's really difficult to watch the news when those stories are constantly, on the news. But we're here to talk about mental health. We're here to talk about the hard stuff. We're here to talk about specifically depression tonight. And I know it's not very easy subject for a lot of people to talk about. What's going on, Rodson? What's going on, Joe? I'm still tagging a few people in here. And we'll get this party started. But tonight we are going to go over depression, and depression is a complex thing. I mean, there are literally 21 million Americans in the U.S. have had at least one major depressive episode. 17% of our adolescents have had at least one major depressive episode. So, I mean, this depression is really, hitting our society all across the ages. Like nobody is safe from depression, and something we should teach our children more about, especially in schools, because since adolescents specifically deal with, a lot of depression stuff. But I'm tagging some new people in, maybe some people who don't usually watch me, and people who do, of course. So if you could hit that like button, share me out, even if you're not going to stay, it really helps get myself out there to get more people who want to learn about mental health specifically. And back to the comments. Put some more tags. Let's do some shares. I know I don't want to share too much because last week I got hit really hard and I just got off my van. So I don't know why Waylon has a 5-minute intro. He does all his tagging in that 5 minutes. And I'm watching it. I think it's usually too long. You couldn't hear me. But yeah, sometimes the intros I think is too long, but now I understand why it has the intro, so you can tag all your friends in. And there's still a whole bunch more people that could tag in here. Got a minute. Thank you for joining me. I know it's been a busy holiday. It's been a really strange holiday, I think. Maybe mixed with the heat, the full moon, and then I don't know. There was just a lot of weird energy out, and I'm sure you guys could feel it too. And I think we had 24 mass shootings over the holidays, and that's pretty disturbing. And that I mean, when I see stuff like that, that's why I have this podcast. I want to educate people and keep why our society is failing and why people are getting more violent, and educate people on what we can do about it. Because these people who become violent like this were not born violent. They were not like before, And our society really lacks the services to help these people, come out from the hole, and then before you know it, they're walking down the street with AK-47 shooting anybody they want at, like they did just happened in Philadelphia over the weekend. And tag in. But if you could share me out, tag me. I like getting with people in here and trying to make sure I got most of the people that usually join me, at least in May. There we go. But we'll get started here. Hi, what's going on, Carrie? Kim, what's going on? Valerie? I hope everybody's having a great holiday week. It's been I hate when the holiday falls on a weekday, because then you don't know what day it is. And I think it's Wednesday, but it's supposed to be Mental Health Mondays on Wednesday, so that makes it even more confusing. So it is Wednesday today, just so you guys all know. But some kind of surprising facts about depression. Like I said, 21 million adults in the U.S. having one major depressive episode. That's 8.4% of all adults. Honestly, I think it's higher than that. But these stats this is what the stats say. This is from I believe it's from the Department of Mental Health or whatever, who keeps these tracks. 2011, the National Institute of Mental Health. We have 4.1 million adolescents in the U.S. have at least one major depressive episodes. And I'm sure some of maybe your kids have, or maybe you've discussed it with your kids' friends who have maybe gone through a depressive episode. We're talking major depression. We're not talking something minor. This is something that can basically, what we're going to learn today is what it does to the body. It's not very good. It basically kills brain cells, not kills brain cells, but the connections inside of your neurons are just not as strong when you are depressed. And we're going to learn about that today, why it happens. And it's one of the it usually, on average, it takes somebody 10 years before they are actually diagnosed correctly. And depression is very complex because it comes and goes in different forms. And there are also different kinds of depression, including postpartum, psychotic, seasonal, and major depression. And there are people who literally do have seasonal depression who get depressed in the winter. And when spring comes, they're not depressed anymore. That's called seasonal depression. And it is actually an occurring thing that happens to people. And it actually happens because of the lack of vitamin D from the sun and a lot of other combinations. But I think we can learn a lot about depression, even though if you don't suffer from it, you do know somebody who does. Or at one point you may suffer from it in your life, and it's good to be educated in how and why it happens. Yeah, Kim, that's true. And I every time that one of these mass shootings happen, I kind of study who the actual person who does it. I have not looked into this guy, but almost 99.9% of the time the person has a treatable mental illness. And at one point it was treatable, but at one point they go down the rabbit hole of violence, and you can't come back from that. But a lot of these issues in our society where depression leads to something way more serious, where people start to become delusional, where people start to become, and I'm not knocking on borderline personality disorder, but borderline personality disorder can lead to something, even to psychosis and something deeper, where these people become violent. They don't care anymore. They have the part of their brain that holds the morals is just gone. And we'll learn about that today, about why it happens. When you get depressed, it literally kills, it shuts off these neurotransmitters in your brain, and they start to dysfunction in a way. And it's why when you're depressed, you don't like the things you normally do in life. You start to dislike the normal things you like. It's because your neurons are literally fading away, and it's not because of you. It's because this is all neurology. It's neurons in your brain and everything else. Yeah, sure, Ken. Yeah, it's hard to treat borderline. And Ross, I've been treated with bipolar, but I see a lot of the same symptoms in borderline personality that I have in me when I was at my worst. And I think bipolar and borderline personality, they're very similar, but they have their own differences. But you can also have both of them. And although I was never diagnosed, I always saw the symptoms there, and I researched it a lot. And I understood why it was so hard to diagnose, because the symptoms aren't always there. Thank you, Valerie, for tagging some people in. Saw you there. If you could hit that like button, that really helps. Hit that like, get us out there in the algorithm. And I'm gonna have a few cool, nice videos of educational short videos of what depression is. Let me get to that and share the screen out here. And shut that music off so we can hear. And I totally forgot to take my banner off for the intro, and I keep forgetting that because the banner blocks my intro, and I just noticed it was running there. I'll remember that next time. But let's pop this up on the screen here. And we have a video here of what is depression. It's going to be 4.5 minutes, and it's I went through it earlier. It's really, these 3 videos that I picked today are very packed with information, that a lot of stuff I didn't even know. So
depression is the leading cause of disability in the world. In the United States, close to 10% of adults struggle with depression. But because it's a mental illness, it can be a lot harder to understand than, say, high cholesterol. One major source of confusion is the difference between having depression and just feeling depressed. Almost everyone feels down from time to time. Getting a bad grade, losing a job, having an argument, even a rainy day can bring on feelings of sadness. Sometimes there's no trigger at all. It just pops up out of the blue. Then circumstances change, and those sad feelings disappear. Clinical depression is different. It's a medical disorder, and it won't go away just because you want it to. It lingers for at least 2 consecutive weeks and significantly interferes with one's ability to work, play, or love. Depression can have a lot of different symptoms: a low mood, loss of interest in things you'd normally enjoy, changes in appetite, feeling worthless or excessively guilty, sleeping either too much or too little, poor concentration, restlessness or slowness, loss of energy, or recurrent thoughts of suicide. If you have at least 5 of those symptoms, according to psychiatric guidelines, you qualify for a diagnosis of depression. And it's not just behavioral symptoms. Depression has physical manifestations inside the brain. First of all, there are changes that could be seen with the naked eye and X-ray vision. These include smaller frontal lobes and hippocampal volumes. On a more micro scale, depression is associated with a few things: the abnormal transmission or depletion of certain neurotransmitters, especially serotonin, norepinephrine, and dopamine, blunted circadian rhythms, or specific changes in the REM and slow wave parts of your sleep cycle, and hormone abnormalities, such as high cortisol and deregulation of thyroid hormones. But neuroscientists still don't have a complete picture of what causes depression. It seems to have to do with a complex interaction between genes and environment, but we don't have a diagnostic tool that can accurately predict where or when it will show up. And because depression's symptoms are intangible, it's hard to know who might look fine but is actually struggling. According to the National Institute of Mental Health, it takes the average person suffering with a mental illness over 10 years to ask for help. But there are very effective treatments. Medications and therapy complement each other to boost brain chemicals. In extreme cases, electroconvulsive therapy, which is like a controlled seizure in the patient's brain, is also very helpful. Other promising treatments, like transcranial magnetic stimulation, are being investigated too. So if you know someone struggling with depression, encourage them, gently, to seek out some of these options. You might even offer to help with specific tasks, like looking up therapists in the area or making a list of questions to ask a doctor. To someone with depression, these first steps can seem insurmountable. If they feel guilty or ashamed, point out that depression is a medical condition, just like asthma or diabetes. It's not a weakness or a personality trait, and they shouldn't expect themselves to just get over it, any more than they could will themselves to get over a broken arm. If you haven't experienced depression yourself, avoid comparing it to times you've felt down. Comparing what they're experiencing to normal temporary feelings of sadness can make them feel guilty for struggling. Even just talking about depression openly can help. For example, research shows that asking someone about suicidal thoughts actually reduces their suicide risk. Open conversations about mental illness help erode stigma and make it easier for people to ask for help. And the more patients seek treatment, the more scientists will learn about depression, and the better the treatments will get.
Sure. That was like I said at the end, the get rid of the stigma. That's what we're doing here at the Rumination Project. We're trying to remove the stigma of actually talking about mental health. And I kind of see it when I interact with people in the real world outside of my podcast, and they tell me what I'm doing is like really important. And there's not a lot of men who are openly talking about their mental illness, and I felt like that was really important to open up about being depressed or dealing with anxiety or dealing with bipolar issues. And I forgot I can bring up comments, but Kim here, I think many instances of most mental illness stem from PTSD. Yeah, I agree. You can kind of sense it if you are very aware of your body and aware of your brain. You can sense how that depression can come from PTSD and how it relates to past trauma and the things that happened in your life where your body reacts to it. And the bipolar issues and PTSD, fight or flight, anxiety, depression, they all really interact with the other, and they kind of, if you keep one around for a while, they kind of degrade into something worse. Like anxiety can lead to serious depression, and then depression can lead to a more serious mental illness like bipolar, borderline personality, and then you can go deeper into the hole if you don't get the help you need. And I started out with basically generalized anxiety that turned into depression in my teens, that turned into bipolar into my 30s. So it kind of matured and kind of changed, and it was really hard to nail down. But now that I have diagnosed with bipolar, looking back, I actually see all the symptoms I had my whole life. They were just kind of below the surface. They didn't all come out at once, and some of them were very minor. So that's why it's really hard, to do to diagnose these, because mental illness changes as our brains mature over as adults. It's something I've seen in my own life as my brain has matured, and my mental illness kind of got worse for a while until I went to the herbal treatment that you guys all know with CBD, CBG, lion's mane, and magic mushrooms, which has been really successful in my case. So we're going to go to the second video here. Turn off that music, pause that music again. And this is how basically depression affects the brain. This is a pretty 3.5 minute video, but it is full of information. And we'll bring that up now.
The current standard of care for the treatment of depression is based on what we call the monoamine deficiency hypothesis, essentially presuming that one of 3 neurotransmitters in the brain is deficient or underactive.
Neurotransmitters can be thought of as the chemical messengers within the brain. It's what helps one cell in the brain communicate with another to pass that message along.
But the reality is there are more than 100 neurotransmitters in the brain and billions of connections between neurons. So we know that that's a limited hypothesis.
For decades, we thought that the primary pathology, the primary cause of depression, was some abnormality in these neurotransmitters, specifically serotonin or norepinephrine.
However, norepinephrine and serotonin did not seem to be able to account for the symptoms of depression in people who had major depression. Instead, the chemical messengers between the nerve cells in the higher centers of the brain involved in regulating mood and emotion, which include glutamate and GABA, were possibilities as alternative causes for the symptoms of depression.
We know that these two, which are the most ubiquitous and abundant neurotransmitters in the brain, actually regulate how the brain is changing over time and adapting.
When you are exposed to severe and chronic stress, like people experience when they have depression, you lose some of the connections between the nerve cells, and the communication in these circuits becomes inefficient and noisy. Because of the noisy communication in the circuits involved in regulating mood and emotion, we think that the loss of these synaptic connections contributes to the biology of depression.
It's critical to understand the neurobiology of depression and how the brain plays a role in that for two main reasons. One, it helps us understand how the disease develops and progresses, and we can start to target treatments based on that.
There are clear differences between a healthy brain and a depressed brain. And the exciting thing is, when you treat that depression effectively, the brain goes back to looking like a healthy brain.
We recognize that the treatment for depression is a long-term process because for many people, depression is a long-term disorder. So we need new treatments. We've needed new ways to approach depression for people that haven't responded well to their prior treatments.
We are in a new era of psychiatry. This is a paradigm shift away from a model of monoaminergic deficiency to a fuller understanding of the brain as a complex neurochemical organ.
It's really interesting. And guess what's leading the way? Magic mushrooms. Magic mushrooms are leading the way to completely opening up Pandora's box on mental illness. And I stay very up to date on all these studies. And they're not only using psychedelics to study depression, but they're using it to study the brain. And they're using it to understand how mental illnesses happen, what the neurology, the neurotransmitters, I mean, that a complex, the brain is very complex. They're understanding it more now at a very, fundamental level. Where is it happening in the brain? What's causing it? What neuron, what transmitter? And the magic mushrooms are helping us understand this because when people take them, the brain chemistry changes. An X-ray or an MRI of the brain looks different on somebody who's on magic mushrooms compared to somebody who's not. And what's going on, Wayne? Yeah, it's Wednesday today. But even the Yale professors and anybody who's a therapist or in treating mental illness knows that we have to change. That this isn't working anymore. That we have so many people who are literally not getting any treatment from Western medicine. I was one of them. I mean, I spent 25 years and I wasn't getting any better. And I tried many different approaches. I tried many different medications, and none of them ever worked. And I think that shows that it just fails altogether. And I know it helps some people, and I know it helps some people get over the temporary depressive state. But pharmaceuticals are not meant to take for long term. No, I said Waylon, and we kind of overdo them, and then they don't work anymore. And then we try another one, and they don't work as well. And I think we're at a shift where we have to make a change of how we treat mental illness. And I think that psychedelics are really leading the way into the next era of treating depression. And I even have a video here that shows the newest science of how it actually treats. It's called "Can Magic Mushrooms Cure Depression?" It actually shows the effects of psilocybin on the brain, and as well as how it affects depression at a fundamental level. Yeah, playing here. And here you go.
Okay, SSRIs are the first-line drug for major depressive disorder, but it was comprehensively beaten by psilocybin, a compound found in magic mushrooms. Can magic mushrooms cure depression? Find out today on Tiny Medicine. The New England Journal of Medicine published a groundbreaking research article on the 15th of April 2021. The psychedelic drug psilocybin competed against escitalopram, a well-established selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor in a small-scale clinical trial. The findings are disruptive. The speed. The problem with SSRIs was that it took 2 to 6 weeks for the onset of therapeutic effects. This trial showed that psilocybin did it faster. People came out of depression faster with the help of psilocybin. But with time, the gap narrowed as both groups of drugs reached the maximum therapeutic effect. In short, both drugs produce similar outcomes, but psilocybin acts fast. The insight. People with severe depression often don't understand why they are depressed. They lack the full insight into the disease. It was found that magic mushroom compounds finally gave these patients the insight to understand why they are depressed.
This was a big part of where I shifted. Everything shifted when I had a magic mushroom experience, and I understood why I got depressed. And I don't think I still have bouts of sadness, and then I think about the dark periods of my life, but I don't think I suffer from depression anymore. And I think that 2021 was probably the last time I really felt it. I don't feel the depression anymore. I more or less feel the fight or flight and anxiety more. And that's something that I deal with on a day-to-day basis. But it knocked the depression out of the water. And I never had it again when I had the insight of why I was depressed. And then the insight of this world's beautiful. And why would I want to, ever hurt myself and end this, end this life. So I found that it was very insightful when you actually understand why you have depression. It can actually help very much cure it.
Half of the study group received escitalopram and the other half received psilocybin. Instead of giving psilocybin every day, researchers gave some placebo capsules in between the dosing days. The insight was greater in days when the group received the actual psilocybin compared to the days they received the placebo capsule. The profound experiences. I'm an atheist, but I have to be unbiased in this discussion. Whether we like it or not, psychedelic users have reported having deeply moving experiences like encountering God or the ultimate reality. If you are a religious person, you can think of psilocybin as a key that opens a gate to your God. If you're an atheist like me, you'd probably believe this experience itself is an effect of psychedelics. Nevertheless, studies conducted at reputed institutes like Johns Hopkins University have found that these mystic experiences have advantages like improving the mental well-being of patients, helping people to quit smoking, and
I got a loading problem. Hold on a second. Well, it doesn't want to reload. I'm still on live. I've never seen that happen. Let me try to reload it here.
experiences
There
like
we go.
encountering
Got it.
God or the ultimate reality. If you are a religious person, you can think of psilocybin as a key that opens a gate to your God. If you're an atheist like me, you'd probably believe this experience itself is an effect of psychedelics. Nevertheless, studies conducted at reputed institutes like Johns Hopkins University have found that these mystic experiences have advantages like improving the mental well-being of patients, helping people to quit smoking, and helping cancer patients with pain and depression. The ancillary effects. Depression is a complex disorder. It's not all about the major symptoms like sadness and inability to feel pleasure. Depression is associated with ancillary effects like not feeling well, reduced social functions, and difficulties in expressing emotions. Though the usual SSRIs were somewhat helpful with these symptoms, it was shown that magic mushroom compounds were far superior on ancillary outcomes. How does psilocybin work? Psilocybin is a psychoactive drug. It is rapidly converted in the body to a compound named psilocin. Psilocin partially activates serotonin receptors of the brain. Serotonin receptors are found in many parts of the brain, including the cerebral cortex. Serotonin plays a vital role in brain functions like mood, sex, appetite, and motivation. The side effects of psilocybin. Magic mushrooms are known to cause visual and auditory hallucinations. Your brain will make you hear sounds even when the ears don't pick any noises. The brain will create vivid images even when the eyes are closed. It can also make time feel slower by altering your time perception. But these effects can be minimized by the right dosing. I don't think it will be a huge issue since psilocybin mushrooms are not known to cause addiction. The wisdom. The problems of the study are the small sample size and the lack of diversity among participants. Nevertheless, these research findings are disruptive. Just think about it. Psilocybin is as effective as standard antidepressants in primary outcomes, but it's faster, provides better insight, and has better ancillary outcomes. And the adverse effects were found to be similar in both groups. So, can't we replace SSRIs with magic psilocybin? Or can we use it as a combination treatment for depression?
It's a good question. And I think that the future of mental health that really lies in magic mushrooms. And there are a lot of people who are very unaware of this. And I found this out when I went to a party on for the 4th of July, and I brought some mushrooms with. And let me get the screen off here. So whenever I bring mushrooms somewhere, it always brings up the conversation. You know, are these the funny mushrooms or magic mushrooms? And at this party, before I knew it, I was in a full-fledged discussion for 20 minutes about magic mushrooms with people who were really intrigued. It was a whole room full of people, and a lot of them did not know that they're doing so much research on magic mushrooms, or two, that it did what it did to the brain, how it healed mental illness, and a lot of other things that it does to the body. So these people were really, their mind was kind of blown open with the stuff that I presented with them, and because a lot of people are just unaware. They don't watch the news. They don't know that we are literally under a huge, we're about to go into a whole different mental health approach once magic mushrooms are legalized. And yeah, thanks, Mr. Beans. I like doing education, and yeah, Kim. Man, dealing with anxiety as a child is really hard, and it leads to a lot of other issues in life that are really difficult to navigate. And thank you guys for all sharing all your stories there in the comments. Appreciate it. But I really think that it's really intriguing how these magic mushrooms, something that was literally grown by nature, treat depression so well, and they return the brain to a normal state of health. And as that video was saying, they literally, you can see the difference in a scan of somebody with depression and somebody who has a healthy brain. And you see that with a lot of other organs when the organ's sick, like if you have pancreatitis, or if you have some kind of cancer, or you have a bad liver, these usually show up in x-rays as well. And I hate that we have the stigma of people who with mental illnesses can control it, when these scans clearly show that something is different in the brain. And just like the same way somebody has a liver cancer, do you tell them just suck it up, your liver will get better? You don't tell them that. So the fact that we kind of look at mental illness different because we don't fully understand it, we don't fully understand the organ of the brain. And a lot of us don't even treat the brain as an organ, but you have to remember it's just like any other organ in the body. It can get ill, it can get sick, it can decay, and it can even get cancer. So I think we need to stop the stigma and promote that this literally, these people's brain chemistries are different. A lot of the times they cannot control the way that they react to a situation, or the way they may be depressed or deal with social anxiety, the fight or flight mode, and all these other issues that we kind of deal with, that we see in society play out through the fact of violence. Because mental health, if you do not correct your mental health and you keep going down that dark path, it always leads most of the time with suicide, homicide, some kind of form of violence. And I've I've seen it with the bipolar when I was in my darkness, and I had really dark thoughts as well. And I think it's important, to somebody who came back from it to talk about it and not be ashamed, because it was a really dark place, and a lot of times it's hard to come back from that and then truly understand what got you there and how to get other people out of it. Because I saw myself, and I'm not saying I'm a serial killer, but when I watched the Jeff Dahmer series, his childhood, besides his surgery and everything else, were very, very fascinating. He had a normal childhood, but at one point in his life, something went wrong with the neurons in his body and in his brain, and it kind of messed him up so bad that he became who he was, and he had no conscience. He had no ability to have empathy. That portion of the brain was just gone, and I don't think people are born like that. I don't think like that form of violence a serial killer is you're not born with it. It happens through your environment. It takes a very long time. It takes certain circumstances, and then it takes where nobody intervenes. If you don't intervene at a certain point to help somebody who's mentally ill, they're just going to go deeper down the hole. Yeah, I like promoting stuff, and and I learned a lot of other people experiment with psychedelics too. So I hope you guys enjoy my educational videos of how I've used them in the past, and on the psychedelic files. But we all have to deal with depression. We see it if you have children, you see it in your children, you see it in yourself, and it's kind of all over. And I hate when I had a friend last year not a friend, but he was a high school friend. I hadn't talked to him for years, and I knew he was in a bad place, but he ended up taking his own life in December. And I knew he was depressed, but sometimes you just, don't know how depressed somebody is. They hide it very well. And after that happened, that was when I started this podcast, because I really wanted to, maybe, educate one person who would find this useful and, save a life. Yeah, we have to, find certain ways to deal with depression. And I forgot I actually had one more video to play about how to go, fight through depression on a daily basis. It was a really good a video that I watched before. Gotta remember what it was though. I think I found it. And it's called Fight Depression and Burnout in 2 minutes a day, 3 good things, activities. And a lot of times, if you get depressed, to really come out of it, you need to have, like, what science shows is 3 consecutive days of something positive. And when you do something consecutive for 3 days, the brain reacts in a very positive way. So, like, say if you don't smoke cigarettes, that 3rd day, there can be a big shift in your behavior, because your brain's like changing behaviors. And after that 3rd day, you can really start to, change that. So I think if you, maybe are depressed, and you can do some little things here and there that kind of make your day better, and then you get a few consecutive good days in a row, it can really, really help you. So this is a short video, and I haven't watched it in a minute, so we'll bring it up here. And then I've played a lot of this woman's videos. She's so insightful. She has thousands of videos on therapy in a nutshell. She's a therapist, I believe, in the northeast of the United States. So she is really informative.
Or dwelling on the good things that happen in your life.
That back.
Your brain is so much better at focusing on survival than it is on focusing on being happy. And it's because of this fact that your brain is constantly scanning for threats. It's trying to pick out or notice anything bad, dangerous, or negative instead of looking for the positive or dwelling on the good things that happen in your life. Your brain's default setting is to keep you alive by really paying attention to anything threatening or dangerous. This focus on survival was imperative to our ancestors, But in today's world, if left unchecked, it can lead to stress, burnout, and depression. But I have good news. There's a simple way to combat this challenge of focusing on the negative and to turn up the volume of the positive things in your life. So stick around, because in this video, I'll teach you how to fight burnout and feel happier. It takes just 2 minutes a day, and thanks to our sponsor, Take 2 Minutes, it's easier than ever to get it done. Okay, so like I said before, our brain is hardwired for survival, which means it's hardwired to notice threats and to notice the negative. The negative grabs our attention while the positive waits for us to notice. When we just run along in default mode, this can make us feel depressed and exhausted. So here's the super simple way to rewire your brain. It's called the 3 Good Things exercise. For 2 weeks before you go to bed, ask yourself, what are 3 things that went well today? And what was my role in making them happen? And then just be sure to write them down. So, for example, yesterday I had a fairly difficult day. It's winter here, it's cold and dreary, it's really difficult to get outside with the kids. And with COVID, we can't take them to play places or to see very many friends. So basically, it was another entire day cooped up in the house with 3 super energetic little kids. And there may have been some tantrums, and I may have yelled at the kids, and it's just tough sometimes. Anyways, when I sit down and think of 3 good things, it sounds like this. I got to sit on the floor and make a cool sticker puzzle with my 3-year-old, and she really enjoyed it. Plus, she was practicing her numbers, and she was being quiet during church, so that was really nice bonding time with her. Number 2 is I got to make earrings with my 6-year-old, and it's really fun to make things with her, especially without the 2 little kids. And then number 3, we had a crazy WrestleMania with all the kids in the living room, and that got some wiggles out, and the girls laughed and screamed a lot, and so that was really fun. And that's it. That's all there is to it. And when I do it, I feel better. And the amazing result is that research shows that within 4 to 5 days, reflecting on the positive leads to noticing more positive. The positive things in your life and those feelings of happiness and contentment just keep growing, and it's like that positive just gets louder. Clinical trials show that people who do this for 14 days have less burnout and depression, a better work-life balance, less conflict at school or work, and a higher level of happiness. And the really cool thing is that the results from those 14 days can last for 6 months or more. So this exercise for just 2 weeks can impact you for almost half a year or more. And it just takes 2 minutes a day. So how cool is that, right?
Yeah.
Now, I think the biggest barrier to doing an activity like this is that it's easy to forget to do it. But that's where Take 2 Minutes comes in. What they do is they send you a text message every day at the time you choose. This message not only pulls you from your routine to think about your 3 good things, but it also includes a link to a page where you can enter 3 good things instantly, instead of having to find pen and paper. And then once you complete your entries, they'll store your answers in your personal private journal, which you can easily access at any time to review and reflect on. It's super easy. Seriously though, this activity is so powerful, and Take 2 makes it so easy to do it. They are sponsoring this video, which I'm grateful for, but I also seriously love their service. You can find them by texting join to this number below, or by visiting take2minutes.org. They also have guided meditations, an easy gratitude journal, and some great resources to help you with anxiety and sleep and other stuff. So it's that easy. Every night before you go to bed, think of 3 good things that happened to you and what you did to bring them about. I would love to hear what your 3 good things are. Leave yours down in the comments section below. Thank you for watching, and take care.
She's got a lot of useful videos on how to, deal with just the minute things of life. And she's right. You can just little exercises like that during the day really have a huge impact over time, as over 14 days, and you can really see a difference in your positivity. And as she said, you're at work and everything else, just by writing down, what you're grateful for, what went good that day. And it really reminds me of the way shamans kind of teach. And I actually, when I heard her say that, I was reminded of a book that I have called The Wisdom of the Shamans. And they have a lot of exercises in this book This is written by Don Jose Roots, who wrote the Four Agreements. I think it's Four Agreements, yeah. And they use a lot of exercises in the book to release trauma as well, because the shamans believe that when you wrote something down or you said it out loud, that your brain kind of acted differently, and it was more healing. And a lot of exercises include the book of writing down things you may regret in your life, bad things, and then burning them or destroying them. And it's a very ritualistic thing to kind of heal your brain, because when you write it down or you actually say it out loud, your brain reacts completely differently than if you're just thinking it. And that's why they say that talking is one of the healing salves of the universe, because when you talk, like talk therapy, you are healing your brain because you're talking it out, your brain's thinking about it, and then kind of reinserting it in your memory in a different way, since it's listening to itself, kind of. Yeah, the Four Agreements is a good book. It's really difficult book to live by those rules in today's world. I will say that, because we know how today's world is kind of hard, and there's a lot of people who hate you. There's a lot of people who send nasty messages from like I had yesterday, where I got a random nasty message from somebody, and I really had to push through this nastiness to be be the better person, to know that whatever they say is not true, and not let it bring me down to a depressive state like it did in my past when somebody said something really nasty to me. And I think that these books really help interact with these people when you have nasty interactions with people who are just not very nice, who are not very very happy people, who are never going to be a happy and good person in life. And yeah, and if I remember a quote, let me find that shaman quote. I should have it in my background, because it's so truth. Well, let's see if I can find it. But it's dancing, singing, storytelling, and silence are the four universal healing salves, according to shamanic tribes, or the wisdom of shamans. And if you think about it, dancing, singing, storytelling, and silence are kind of things that we don't do a lot in society. And that's why they would have these big social events in these shamanic societies, where they would dance around the fire, they would sing, somebody would tell a story, and then they'd all go home and sit in silence. And we don't do any of that in today's society, and our brains have gone chaos because we don't do any of these things. The four healing salves are dancing, singing, storytelling, and silence. And you have to have the ability to sit in silence of your own thoughts and brain to really understand yourself. So if you never sit in silence like that, or you don't feel comfortable sitting in silence, you never can go deep into your own brain, or your own subconscious, as we call it. And I know some people who actually struggle with the solitude part, and I don't. I've had, my trauma is loneliness, so I know what it feels like, and I can sit by myself very well, just fine, and be just fine. Although I love to be social, I love to interact with people, I love the intimate relationship that we have with the opposite sex. I love all that, but I do love being quiet and silent by myself. But I have like a gauge, I call it. It's a social gauge, and sometimes my social meter, after I go to an all-day concert, or you're going like a camping trip with a bunch of people, my social meters tends to go down, and then I may spend a day or two by myself, or very away from people, just to regain that social meter that I kind of have. And I think we all kind of have one anyway. We kind of some of us have a bigger meter, some of us can go out and have very social lives and not have it interact with our mental health in any way. But going out in public and dealing with people interactions is not easy. It's exhausting sometimes, as Rhino said. Yeah, you get exhausted. Probably a lot of the stuff is just interacting, talking, socializing. You have to use a lot of those portions of your brain, and eventually those portions of your brain get a little tired and they need rest. But I think I was trying to find the whole document that actually, it was a little story about the 4 healing sounds of the shaman. And it's in my book, but I won't be able to find it. And then I can't find it when I need to. That's the truth. Here it is. And I can bring it up here. Well, if I find it. That is not the right one. Oh, it's so small anyway, you can't even read it. Maybe I can zoom in. But it says in many shamanic societies, if you came to a shaman or medicine person complaining or being disheartened, dispirited, or depressed, they would ask one of 4 questions. When did you stop dancing? When did you stop singing? When did you stop being enchanted by stories? When did you stop finding comfort in the sweet territory of silence? Where we have stopped dancing, singing, being enchanted by stories, or finding comfort in silence, where we have experienced the loss of the soul. Dancing, singing, and storytelling and silence are the 4 universal healing sounds. And I believe it says Gabriel Roth quote said that, but it is such a truthful quote. I mean, that really, and that is the truth of many shaman societies. If you were ill, that's what the shaman would tell you. He'd ask you, have you stopped dancing? Have you stopped singing? Enchanted by stories, or finding comfort in the sweet territory of silence? And even, telling my stories is important, not only for me, but to educate people as well. But it actually is very healing for me as well. And when I first started that Mental Health Monday, and I noticed talking about it, whether or not anybody was listening, just talking about it made my brain react differently. And I've noticed it every time I come on here, and then I get off, how much better my brain feels, how much, just talking about it. And I think it's important that we all, tell our own story and talk about, our own depression. And that's why I love these comments here about people, sharing their own experiences. And yeah, the person's behavior has a little to do with you. And it's even worse with Facebook, because now people can make fake profiles and hide behind the keyboard and say the worst awful things to people. And that's really awful behavior that these human adults that do this. And it really just blows my mind that somebody would go to that level of making up a Facebook profile and just to troll people and say awful things to them without them knowing. What link am I going to send, Rhino? The link to but yeah, if you want a good book, I do recommend The Wisdom of the Shamans, and it has a lot of good information in it, and it really talks, you can see what the ancient masters can teach us about love and life. And it really helps. What the great thing about shamanism is you can apply it to any religion. Like they believed in gods, but the what's offered in that book, you can instill into any religion that you believe in. That's why I love the shamans, because I'm a pantheist. I believe in what science can prove. So I kind of find the book fascinating, because you can kind of separate yourself from that and still get healing and guidance from the shaman. And I've also looked into Buddhism as well. Buddhism is a great source for a lot of ancient knowledge of how to heal the brain, and dealing with mental health, and dealing with society, and dealing with tribalism. What's going on, Jimmy? And tribalism is something that really is hard. I need to do a whole episode on what tribalism really is, because tribalism affects us so many different ways. Like when from our mothers instilling us by taking us to church, to how tribalism is just instilled in our schools and everything else. And this book really talks about how to separate yourself from tribalism and kind of find yourself and who you are by, yourself, and not based on who your parents forced you to be, or maybe they forced you into playing a sport and that's not who you are. But separating yourself from tribalism is kind of finding who you are without the society part of it, and that the shamans really tried to instill that a lot. And I try to separate myself from things like that tribalism, so I can make a decision about something without having the bias of that tribalistic feature in my life. Like if you go to church, using the church to make a decision about buying a house, or whether to move or not, and that's great. Everybody can do their own thing, but that's just how I kind of operate. I kind of separate myself from that, kind of connect to nature and the universe to find answers to decisions. Yeah, Kim looks like she died with a troll too in the comments. But the best thing about doing trolls is hit the block button and then just forgetting about them. The block button works great. And when you don't engage with trolls, that just pisses them off more, because that's what they want. They want you to engage, and they want you to get emotional. And when you don't engage, you win. So I usually don't engage. I usually hit the block button, and then I never have an interaction again. But yeah, that's Don Jose Riz is a great book, and he even tells a story about his father in the book, and I found it fascinating that it's a true story in the book about his dad. Don went to this cave and he summoned all these snakes. Like he said, like literally 30 to 50 snakes, I think, in the book just came out of the cave, and his jaw dropped, and he thought his dad had some kind of magical talent. But shamans they're weird, man. They do have some kind of magical power. And maybe it's the fact that their brains are so they're so relaxed, they have no anxiety, they really don't suffer from depression, because they're so in touch with themselves, the universe, and their spirituality, that maybe other animals can see that. And I do believe that other animals can sense fear or anxiety or being relaxed, and they know when you're either one. So I found that fairly fascinating in the book, when he tells about how his dad went to the cave and summoned these snakes. Yeah, it's a very interesting family. And this book was written, I think his son wrote it, but his dad actually wrote it. Don Miguel Rios. Also was shared in the wisdom of the shamans. Don Jose Rios, my second son, shares the sacred teachings of our family's shamanic tradition. And each chapter is full of really just a lot of stories. And each chapter has kind of a story: the eagle and the snake, the riverman, the birth of Quetzalcoatl, the jungle, the rattlesnake intuition, which is the story about how he summoned all the snakes out of the cave, the devil's cave, divinity and discernment, and the day of the dead. And all these are different chapters or stories, and then it has a lesson at the end of how you take that story and interact it into your life, and then as well as exercises that you can use in the book of how to, like writing exercises and then burning, which I actually found very useful. I've done it before. I've written down things when I do mushrooms, and then I burn the paper. And when you burn it on mushrooms, the experience is just way more profound. It's way more, your brain takes it very, very seriously. And when you write down something that may be bothering you, and then you burn it, and your brain will definitely react to it in a positive way. And the shamans knew that. They knew how writing something down and then destroying it played in part to the visual, and then how it interacted with your brain chemistry. That's such a good book. I actually bought two of them because I let people borrow mine. I have a hard copy, and then I have a soft copy, and then I have the Audible book. I have an Audible subscription, so I have the Audible book too. But the Audible book is awesome. If you want to listen to that, you can listen to it in like I think, an hour and a half, the whole book. And he actually uses the author's voice to read the book, and I always love that when Audible uses the author's voice to read the book, so you actually get it straight from the author. And maybe that's why I'm confused. Maybe I think the book was read by his son on Audible, but it was written by his dad, but his dad's not alive anymore, so his son read the book on Audible. That's why I got it confused that his son wrote the book, but no, his son's the one who reads it in Audible. So yeah, like I get Audible and then I cancel after 2 months. And the great thing about Audible, all the books that you've already bought are still in your library. So even if you cancel and then resubscribe, you can pick up more books and kind of build up your inventory. And they don't. Once you end your subscription, you don't lose all those books you bought. So that's the great thing about it. Because I find myself, I listen better than reading, and then I can actually multitask. Like I can play a book while I'm working and listen, multitask. Because you obviously can't do that while you're reading, trying to do construction and read a book. So yeah, they're really good books that have helped. I've tried self-help books, but they're too Western medicine. Their approach is not Eastern medicine. I find the Eastern medicine approach interesting for the fact that these people had nothing else to do but sit around and study their brain for thousands of years. They didn't have TVs, tablets. They had nature, they had their brains, and they had the universe. And I think that they understood things at a different level than we give them credit to. So I think it's important to look back into Eastern medicine as an approach to mental health, because I tried the Western medicine approach for 20 years and I was disappointed, and I still am disappointed. What's going on, Rebecca? And it still disappoints me a lot to this day how much of a failure our Western medicine is to people. And it's I had another friend of mine. I've talked about this before. I had a suicidal incident in 2019 where I was suicidal and depressed. I called a doctor's office in Quincy, US. They have many doctors, and they said we can get you in 3 months. They said 3 months. What am I going to say? Like, I'm not going to be, if I'm legally depressed and suicidal, am I going to be alive in 3 months? And I told them that, and they're like, well, just go to the ER. But the ER does not have people who are to understand the depression like a doctor's office. And that right there that's our failure. Like, you can call every doctor's office and you get it in 3 months. Like, how does that helpful? Like, it's a joke. And I had another friend too who stated on Facebook last week that she called a doctor's office too, claiming she was suicidal. And they're like, we can get you in 4 months. Why even tell people that? Why? That's just a joke when you say 4 months when they're, suicidal. So this happens all across our nation. And this is where our first failure is we don't even have the services to offer people to help them. And then a lot of these people then go to their general doctor and get a prescription without talk therapy, and then they're addicted to pharmaceuticals. And it boggles my mind how the whole system is not integrated together, how it's just a complete failure. And I know there are doctors out there. I know there are people who see therapists who are amazing therapists who have a really good regimen of medicine, and that's great. But it's very rare. It's like 10 to 15% of people are like that, and the rest of us our brains don't react like that. So I think I need to blow my nose. Excuse me. I do get a little emotional when I talk about this because I have dealt with depression. So I know it tends to run a little bit. So I apologize. And I know there's another guy I watch a lot of his shows. He's actually one of the MAPS members. So he's like involved in all the psychedelic studies. And he has dealt with depression too. And they call him, he cries on the TV a lot because when they start talking to me he says the same thing I do. I'm like, I went through the darkness. You have that empathy to connect with people who are going through it. And you can feel it. You can feel the depressive state around the whole world, not just in individuals, but just you can sense it when you have a deep empathy like that, and it makes me a little emotional sometimes. Yeah, I think I probably will eventually cry. I did a live. I didn't do a live when I first starting podcast, and I have a YouTube video that's called "How to Heal Your Brain on Psychedelics," and it's a 45-minute video how I basically explained more or less the step process I went to healing my brain over the last 2 years. And there's a point in that video where I freeze and I don't say anything for a whole minute because I thought I was going to cry. And now I've come a long way. I actually watched that video last night, and I watched how much I've matured in my ability to communicate in just a short 14-month period. And you look back at that 14 months ago, and I was like I was watching a child, and now here I am, doing more live podcasts and being able to enunciate better, get my point across without my fear and emotions, getting in the way. What's going on, Sir Steve-O? Steve-O waking up from a nap before he goes on to Waylon's podcast here, and it's we're calling it Waylon Wednesdays now? Is that what? Waylon Wednesdays on Grow Fam episode tonight. Yeah, depression is no joke. It's a fight every day, and that's why I am excited about the future of the psychedelic treatment to treat depression, because it works so well when you compare it to all these other SSRs and these other prescriptions that you can get through your doctor to treat mental illness, treat depression specifically. And if you were joining me before, I'd played the whole video of how the future of psychedelics is going to be used to treat mental illness. So I suggest anybody just check that out on a daily basis. There's more research coming out weekly as more of these studies complete, and we find out more of the actual data of how they interact with people. Yeah, I think by 2030, I think by that year and with 7 years, I think it's going to be pretty normal to see people using psychedelics to treat mental illness. And that's not that far down the road, even though it seems like it, but we've made a lot of progress in the last 20 years to get to this point of research where we're on the precipice of being legalized at a federal, federally. And it just got legalized in Australia July 1st. You can now get a prescription to treat depression with magic mushrooms, PTSD with MDMA. So it's great that Australia has now started to lead the way of one of the bigger, first world nations to actually enact this and bring it into their society and actually see how it works out. And I believe the United States and Canada are watching very closely right now. I think the UK and Germany and a lot of these other countries who are thinking about legalizing as well, especially Germany. Germany is very interested, are watching very closely to what Australia is doing and how it's going to open up, in society. Because it's never happened. We've never offered this service to the masses. And we will see what happens. I think it's going to be intriguing first year by next summer when we have all this data available about how it's treating people, how people are using it, and as well as if it's working, which I know it is, but I can't wait to see that actual data when it's offered to people, because a lot of these studies, they choose the people, and now people get to choose the medicine. So now people who may not have been able to get into a study now can take it, and we can see how it interacts with a more normal human brain, maybe, or maybe somebody who may be more ill, like with bipolar or borderline personality. And I'm very intrigued to see how it treats that, because there is no research on that. They're too scared to try to give it to somebody who's bipolar like me. In fact, I actually looked into the studies, and I would be immediately declined because I have diagnosed bipolar. And they're still very leery at giving it to somebody because they still think it can cause psychosis. And I think in a way it does. I mean, there are times where I've been a psychedelic, and I was in psychosis, but I've seen it in normal people who don't have bipolar. So I think I understand why they're doing it, because all the studying we've done, we don't want to ruin it by having somebody have one bad experience in one of these studies. So I'm happy with them taking it slowly, but I hope one day that we do actually get the data on how it treats bipolar and borderline personality disorder, because these are neurological illnesses, and that's what magic mushrooms fix. So I don't see why it would not actually help, treat it. But yeah, I think we've been on for an hour and 12 minutes. Don't forget to hit that like button if you haven't. Get those likes up in here. But I appreciate everybody joining me. I think that's probably all the stuff we wanted to go over today. And if you wanted to watch it again, it'll always be on Facebook. And I think, what are we talking about next week? Find my schedule. I think it was. I don't remember what it was. Gotta find my page. There we go. So we have done anxiety, fight or flight, depression, and next week we're gonna do PTSD. Sorry, trauma. We'll do trauma next week and then PTSD, because I think trauma really plays into what PTSD. So, and I've already done an episode on trauma, but I did it like a year ago, and I did it when I didn't have this live stream. So I'm going to live stream and do another episode on trauma, and I'm going to do a little more updated information. So next week we'll go over trauma, and then the following week PTSD, and then I'm going to go into different spectrums of illnesses from bipolar, OCD, ADHD, a lot of different mental illnesses, borderline personality, and then eventually go into other things like how dreaming interacts with your mental health, because I believe dreaming does, especially now that I've started to use psychedelics. I see now how dreaming interacts with these psychedelic experiences and how it interacts with your mental health. I can see it very, very clearly. And that's really fascinating, because I never really thought that I would understand how my dreams interact with what my brain's trying to tell me. So we can go over more of that. That's still going to be months down the road, probably, because I have a lot of things I'd like to talk about. But dreams are definitely a fascinating subject on how it relates to your mental health. And postpartum depression, I really want to do one on that. And I would love to have women on here who have dealt with it. And I'm going to try to find some women locally who will join me. But if anybody who's listening in the future has dealt with postpartum depression, then would love to talk about it, because I think that's a very important subject. We talk about it because a lot of women deal with it after having children. And I think it's important why we understand how it happens in the brain and how the body's changed in these women after having children, so that we can help them in a better way. So we don't just tell them, you're just having hormonal issues, as men tell women, but it's something deeper than that. Postpartum depression is definitely something deeper. And I can't wait to discuss that as well. So again, I am Dan Baird with the Rumination Project, with Mental Health Mondays on a Wednesday. And I thank you guys for joining me, and I hope you guys can join me next week. And tomorrow we're doing, I forgot, the Ruminating Gardener, and I have Hobbies as a guest. And the Ruminating Gardener is going to be my fun podcast where we can have guests and smoke cannabis openly. But Hobbies is going to be my first guest, and what the Ruminating Gardener is we're going to kind of tour my garden, my mushroom garden, my cannabis garden, and we're going to tour other people's gardens. And then we're going to go over what makes your garden different, why you love gardening, and everything else in between. So it's going to be a great show. And tomorrow we are having some giveaways. I'm not sure what I'm going to give away yet, but we're going to have some giveaways because it's the first episode of the Ruminating Gardener. So I hope to see you guys then. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your night, and go over there and join Waylon, the indoor farmer, on GrowFam. I believe it's on, or his personal page for Waylon Wednesdays. I think I'm getting the name wrong, because I think he just changed it. But again, we'll see you next week, next Monday, 6:30 with the Rumination Project's Mental Health Mondays, and we'll be talking about PTSD. So until then, we'll see you guys later. And do not forget to love yourself. Do not forget to give yourself grace. And with that, anything is possible. We'll see you guys.